White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy Stephen Miller and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem now live on military bases. They are among at least 6 senior Trump administration appointees to do so in the Washington area, leaving them both isolated from the Capitol they help govern and sheltered from political violence, but also protest. Joining us now, staff writer for The Atlantic, Tom Nichols, and staff writer for The Atlantic, Michael Schur. Michael, what's the deal with this?
Well, some of these people had moved on to bases months ago. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, Pete Hegseth, the Defense Secretary, I think they just liked the convenience of it. Some of this is because of concerns over security threats and increased precautions that were actually taken after the Charlie Kirk assassination in September. In the case of Stephen Miller in Northern Virginia, there was a protest group that was sort of harassing his family, putting out flyers with his address, chalking his sidewalks. Their family basically decided it was too dangerous after the Kirk killing. There's another senior White House person who we are not naming, who's moved to a military base since Kirk because of a foreign threat. And then Kristi Noem moved around the same time, but she moved out of her apartment in Southeast because there were pictures run in the Daily Mail basically showing the building she was living in, and that made her uncomfortable.
Tom, is it who normally lives on these bases? Are they kicking anybody out?
No, these are senior officer housing. It's not unprecedented. This has happened before, as Michael's article notes, it's not like there are people being put in the street. It does stretch senior housing a bit because there aren't a lot of these. These are pretty nice houses. But if there's a safety issue involved, it's an understandable move.
Yeah, I understand the safety thing. My question, though, is a bigger one about how they are supposed to represent the district. They are supposed to be in touch with the vibe of the district, with the desires of the people who live there and the country more broadly. And I wonder if there's any concern about being shielded from that, Michael.
Yeah, there's always been a tension there. Most senior officials in the federal government live in the city of Washington or in the neighborhoods around Washington. And, activists regularly protest outside their houses and regularly do things to make them uncomfortable. Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State for Biden, for months had people actually in tents on the roadside, as he took his kids to and from school every day. They'd have to drive through basically a protest encampment who were calling him a genocidal killer because his support for the Israeli government. So there's long been a situation where officials can be made to be uncomfortable. What I think the shift here is that people are pulling this escape hatch. There wasn't a lot of examples in the last couple of administrations of officials who, when they face protests like this, deciding to leave their homes. Now, the question of whether there are more serious threats and whether the general political environment is becoming more dangerous is a different one. And it may well be that this is just the beginning of a new way of doing things, that if you're in the senior ranks of federal government, you can't live in the community anymore.
Yeah, that would be depressing.
We're back with some breaking news. New reporting this morning that the U.S. is preparing to strike targets inside Venezuela, a major escalation against the Maduro regime. And this is according to the Miami Herald, which has sources with knowledge of the situation telling the paper the Trump administration has decided to attack military installations inside Venezuela, and they could come at any time. That as House members from both sides of the aisle say they were left with more questions than answers after a classified briefing yesterday on the administration's strikes on alleged drug boats.
There were not very good answers as to, what is the standard, what is occurring. Lawyers were supposed to be in the room. They were not. People were very frustrated in the information that was being provided.
Am I leaving satisfied? Absolutely not. They just said that they can't answer these questions because the lawyers aren't here. They canceled having the lawyers here.
Are you hearing from the right people?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Since early September, at least 61 people have been killed in 14 known strikes in the Caribbean and the Pacific. For more on this, let's bring in MSNBC senior national security reporter David Rode and retired commander of the United States Army Europe, Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. So, David, starting on this new reporting from the Miami Herald, as well as the Wall Street Journal, that the administration is eyeing targets inside Venezuela to go from boats to land. How significant is this?
It's very significant. We're trying to confirm it independently. We don't have that yet. But this is a big step forward in terms of the War Powers Act. And I just looked this up. Section 3 of the War Powers Act says that the president, in every possible instance, shall consult Congress before introducing U.S. forces into imminent hostilities. And so what the Miami Herald and the Journal are reporting is that these would be strikes by U.S. forces on Venezuelan military facilities. Venezuela has anti-aircraft systems. So this is a much more serious thing than these strikes that have been happening on boats that don't really threaten U.S. forces. So we'll have to see what's happening. We'll keep pushing our sources as well. And we're reaching out to people on the Hill. And as far as I've been able to learn, members of the Hill, at least one has told me that they have not been informed of any kind of imminent strike. That doesn't mean they're not happening. They're just saying they haven't heard much information from the administration.
General sources with knowledge of the situation are telling the Miami Herald that these strikes could come at any time. What's your reaction to this potential escalation?
First of all, Anna, what I'd talk about, and David's talking about the immediate strikes. What I'm more interested in as a military guy is what are the strategic objectives? What's the end state? What's the administration clearly defining as mission success in this? Is it just to bomb targets, or is there something related to that? Secondly, how does this campaign, if you will, if they describe it as such, challenge broader U.S. national defense interest in the Western Hemisphere? How are they coordinating with other countries in the region? A strike against Venezuela is certainly going to affect countries like Colombia, Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico. And have they assessed the second and third order effects of a major naval air strike capability against Venezuela, against not only the other countries in the region, but what does that end state look like? And is there a difference between what they're claiming is counter-narcotic operations, that was the original take they mentioned, versus what appears to be either a destruction of the Venezuelan military or first strikes and an attempt to regime change? So that's just a small portion of the questions I would have as a military guy, and saying, are there other people reining this in? You get into the legal ramifications like David just said and what's in the War Powers Act. You also get into operational transparency. The American public have a right to know about this, and that's why Congress is so interested, and they've been pushed aside on every request for what is happening in terms of the targeting of these boats. Anna, the questions are endless. Yep. And I don't think the Trump White House has answered any of them.
I mean, there have been now at least a couple of briefings that we're aware of. But, David, we heard from those lawmakers say there is still a major lack of transparency, that they aren't getting their questions answered, in part because they aren't able to ask the right people their questions. Who should be given these briefings, and who should be part of these briefings from the administrative side?
Well, one basic thing would be, usually these are more intelligence focused, but the Gang of Eight in Congress gets to know before there's any major operation. There's maybe some gray area in terms of the military, but those would be the chairs of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees, and the ranking members and the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader in the Senate would be informed of this. And, we'll have to see if they've heard about this. And the questions that the general's asking are the right ones, like what is the long-term strategy here?
Remember just a couple of weeks ago when the Trump goons in charge of the military, not the actual career professionals, but Trump and his MAGA cronies, basically forced out all the real journalists? They removed all the genuine journalism and basically said, we don't want real journalism. We don't want stories getting out in the media. We want you to be our press. They essentially wanted the media to act as extra press secretaries for the Pentagon. The only difference was that the Pentagon wouldn't have to pay for their press staff. They wanted CNN, Fox, and all the other major networks and newspapers to pay for the privilege of acting as stenographers for Hegseth and his group of people. Most of the media said no. So everyone wondered, does that mean there won't be any news coming out of the Pentagon? Because all the actual news sources, and even Fox, which we can disagree with but occasionally does some journalism, were out too. So people thought, well, is any journalism going to come out? Well, it turns out yes. And this is a problem for Hegseth and company because now they have even less control. They've created a combative relationship with the media, and now it's been proven that stories are still going to come out. It's not just going to be through the 2 or 3 sources they've officially approved. Now, stories are going to get out, whether they're leaked, released, or uncovered by reporters who are still able to do their jobs even if they're not officially at the Pentagon. What this demonstrates is that you can't shut down the free press, certainly not this easily. Donald created this mess. Remember, the whole narrative was, oh, the Democrats hate free speech. Oh, the Democrats are hiding during the election, blah, blah, blah. But we knew this would happen. Going back to Trump's first term and his first election, there were many troubling things. His discourse around immigrants and many other topics. But one of the consistent themes was his hostile and frankly threatening posture toward journalism and journalists. This continues in his current term, and it's only gotten worse. Yet journalists have demonstrated that stories about the military are still going to reach the media, even if they don't come from the official approved sources. And that's scary, especially if you're trying to hide something.